The dream that turned into a nightmare. 1. The shiny lie that changed America forever. In January 1848, a quiet moment on the American frontier changed the destiny of an entire nation. James W. Marshall was inspecting a sawmill on the American River in California when he noticed something glittering in the water. At first, it seemed insignificant, just another shiny stone, but it wasn't. It was gold. That single discovery ignited one of the most destructive human migrations in history. Within months, whispers turned into rumors, rumors into headlines, and headlines into mass hysteria. Newspapers screamed promises of instant wealth. Politicians spoke of destiny. Preachers framed it as God's blessing. They called it the California Gold Rush. But what followed was not a fairy tale. It was a blood-soaked, lawless nightmare driven by greed, violence, racism, and the systematic destruction of Native American civilizations. 2. Gold fever, when morality died. By 1849, more than 300,000 people flooded into California. They came from the eastern United States, Mexico, China, Europe, South America. They called themselves 49ers, but history rarely talks about what they became. Men abandoned families overnight. Farmers left crops to rot. Sailors jumped ship and vanished into the hills. Churches emptied. Towns collapsed. This wasn't migration. This was gold fever, a psychological epidemic. People stopped seeing neighbors. They saw competition. They stopped seeing land. They saw profit. They stopped seeing human beings. They saw obstacles. 3. A land already occupied but ignored. Long before gold seekers arrived, California was home to over 300,000 Native Americans, living in hundreds of tribes with rich cultures, languages, and spiritual connections to the land. These tribes had complex trade systems, advanced land management, sustainable food practices, deep spiritual traditions. To them, gold was meaningless. But to the newcomers, Native Americans were standing in the way of riches. And in the gold rush mindset, anything standing in the way had to be removed. 4. The first genocide on American soil. What followed was not accidental violence, it was organized extermination. Native Americans were shot for sport, poisoned with strychnine-laced food, hunted like animals, sold into forced labor, raped, displaced, and massacred. Entire villages vanished overnight. California's first state government funded militias to hunt Native people. Newspapers openly called for extermination. Politicians referred to Native Americans as vermin. Between 1846 and 1873, California's Native population collapsed from 300,000 to less than 30,000. This was genocide, and it happened in the name of gold. 5. Murder wasn't a crime if you were white. The gold rush frontier had almost no law enforcement. Justice was replaced by vigilante mobs, lynchings, public hangings, miners' courts run by angry crowds. If you were white, male, and armed, you could get away with almost anything. If you were Native American, Chinese, Mexican, or black, your life had no legal value. Chinese miners were beaten and taxed. Mexican miners were robbed and executed. Black miners were expelled or enslaved again under false charges. This wasn't chaos, it was racial hierarchy enforced by violence. 6. The Chinese Gold Rush Nightmare. By 1852, over 25,000 Chinese immigrants arrived in California, fleeing famine and war. They were promised opportunity. Instead, they found hatred. White miners accused them of stealing gold, lowering wages, being un-American. California imposed the foreign miners tax, targeting Chinese workers specifically. Mobs burned their camps. Courts refused to hear their testimony. Chinese miners were beaten, lynched, and driven into the most dangerous mining areas. Many died silently. Their stories were erased. 7. Rivers turned into graveyards. Mining destroyed nature at an industrial scale. Rivers were diverted, poisoned with mercury, filled with debris. Hydraulic mining blasted entire hillsides into waterways. Fish vanished, farmland flooded, entire ecosystems collapsed. Communities downstream suffered disease, starvation, and economic ruin. Gold enriched a few. It destroyed everything else. 8. Boomtowns built on sin. Gold towns appeared overnight. Saloons, brothels, gambling halls. These towns had no sanitation, no schools, no hospitals, no law. Alcoholism, prostitution, and violence ruled daily life. Women were trafficked, children were exploited, murders were common and rarely investigated. Many towns didn't last a decade. When gold ran out, people vanished, leaving behind ghost towns, rotting symbols of broken dreams. 9. The myth versus the reality. American history books celebrate opportunity, innovation, and expansion, but the gold rush reality was exploitation, racism, environmental destruction, and genocide. For every millionaire created, thousands died poor and forgotten. Most miners never found gold. The real winners were corporations, railroad tycoons, land speculators, banks. The American dream, for most, became an American lie. 10. A dark legacy that still haunts America. The gold rush reshaped America, accelerated westward expansion, cemented racial inequality, normalized environmental destruction, set precedents for corporate greed. It taught one dangerous lesson: profit matters more than people, and America has been paying the price ever since. 11. Vigilante justice, when mobs became the law. There were courts on paper. In reality, California during the gold rush was ruled by the rope, the gun, and the mob. Formal law enforcement barely existed. Judges were corrupt or absent. Sheriffs were outnumbered and outgunned. So miners created their own version of justice. They called them vigilance committees. A few accusations were enough: theft, cheating at cards, being suspicious, being the wrong race. Trials lasted minutes. Evidence didn't matter. Verdicts were immediate. Hangings were public entertainment. Crowds gathered. Children watched. Newspapers celebrated. Justice became revenge disguised as order. 12. Famous murders the history books avoid. The gold rush was soaked in blood, but many murders were buried under legend. The Downville lynching, 1851. A Mexican man named Josefa Segovia was accused of killing a white miner who assaulted her. The trial lasted less than an hour. She was hanged from a bridge in front of a cheering crowd. She was one of the only women lynched in California history. Her crime wasn't murder. It was defying a white man. The Chinese massacres in towns like Shasta, Weaverville, Rock Springs. Chinese miners were attacked en masse. Camps were burned. Workers were dragged from tents and shot. Survivors were driven into the wilderness. No one was punished. Not one. 13. Slavery never ended. It just changed its name. America claims slavery ended in 1865. That's not true. In Gold Rush, California, Native Americans were kidnapped, sold as apprentices, forced to work without pay, abused and discarded. This system was legal. Children were taken from parents, women were raped by owners, men were worked to death. It wasn't slavery, they said. It was civilizing labor. A lie wrapped in legal language. 14. Women in Hell, the untold female experience. Women made up less than 10% of the gold rush population. That didn't make them rare, it made them targets. Many women were trafficked into prostitution, sold by smugglers, abused by minors, forced into survival sex. Some arrived as wives, many ended as prisoners. Brothels were everywhere, disease spread rapidly, violence was constant. Yet women kept towns alive, running laundries, cooking meals, treating the wounded. They were exploited, then erased from history. 15. The myth of equal opportunity. The gold rush promised equality. In reality, it was economic Darwinism. White Americans claimed the best land. Foreign miners were taxed or expelled. Native Americans were hunted. Black miners were threatened or enslaved. The law openly favored one group. The rest were disposable. Gold didn't create democracy. It created hierarchy. 16. Environmental crimes without punishment. Hydraulic mining was brutal. High-pressure water cannons blasted mountains into mud. That mud buried towns, destroyed farms, poisoned rivers. Mercury contaminated water supplies. People downstream got sick. Children were born deformed. Wildlife disappeared. Miners walked away. The damage remains today. 17. Boomtown violence, nights of screams and silence. Gold rush towns were violent after dark. Saloons fueled rage. Guns were everywhere. Arguments ended in death. A man could be killed for looking at someone wrong, winning too much money, being drunk and unlucky. Bodies were often dumped in rivers, buried without names, forgotten by morning. Life was cheap. Gold was everything. 18. Children of the gold rush. Thousands of children grew up in chaos. Many were orphans, abandoned, forced into labor. Some worked in mines, others cleaned saloons. Many died young. There were no schools, no protection, no future. The gold rush stole not just lives, but generations. 20. When gold ran out, humanity vanished. Most miners failed. When the gold disappeared, camps emptied, businesses collapsed, violence faded into silence. People left overnight. No goodbyes, no rebuilding, only empty buildings and unmarked graves. Thus, the first ghost towns were born. 21. The lie that still sells. Even today, the gold rush is sold as adventure. But adventure for whom? Not for native tribes wiped out, immigrants murdered, women exploited, landscapes destroyed. The gold rush wasn't heroic. It was a warning, a lesson humanity refused to learn. 21. Native nations that vanished without graves. Before the gold rush, California was one of the most culturally diverse indigenous regions on Earth. There were hundreds of tribes: Miwok, Maidu, Yurok, Pomo, Yokuts, Modoc. Each had its own language, ceremonies, and ancestral lands. Within a generation, many of these nations were destroyed beyond recovery. Villages were burned, sacred sites were looted, burial grounds were mined for profit. Gold didn't just kill people, it erased memory. 22. Starvation as a weapon. Violence wasn't the only method. Settlers destroyed fishing grounds, hunting routes, acorn groves. Food systems collapsed. Tribes starved while gold was shipped east. Starvation forced survivors into labor camps and reservations that were little more than prisons. This wasn't neglect, it was strategy. 23. the bounties on Native lives. California placed cash rewards on Native American scalps. Men, women, and children had prices. Killing became profitable. Militias submitted receipts to the state treasury. The government paid them. This is one of the darkest chapters in American history, and one rarely taught. 24. Cultures reduced to exhibits. Survivors were displayed like curiosities. Native people were studied, measured, photographed, stripped of identity. Languages disappeared, ceremonies were banned, children were sent to boarding schools where culture was beaten out of them. Gold Rush violence didn't end with death, it continued through cultural destruction. 25. The rise of ghost towns. Gold towns were never meant to last. They were built fast and cheap. Wood rotted, foundations collapsed, fire destroyed entire settlements overnight. When gold veins dried up, people left. What remained were empty saloons, collapsing homes, silent cemeteries. America's first ghost towns were born from greed. 26. Bodie, the town that refused to die. Bodie, California, became one of the most infamous gold rush towns. At its peak, 10,000 residents, 65 saloons, constant gunfire. Murders were weekly events. Children grew up around violence. A little girl once prayed, "Goodbye, God, I'm going to Bodie." When gold ran out, Bodie froze in time. Today, it stands abandoned, still whispering its sins. 27. Coloma, where it all began and died. Coloma was the birthplace of the gold rush. It exploded overnight, then collapsed just as fast. The people who came chasing gold left behind graves without names, ruins without stories. The town became a monument, not to success, but to illusion. 28. Deadwood without the legend. Most ghost towns never became famous. They simply vanished. Places like Shasta, Coulterville, Dutch Flat, once filled with life, now forgotten. Thousands of towns exist only as broken foundations, rusted tools, faded photographs, each one a failed promise. 29. The dead are still there. Many miners were buried where they fell. No coffins, no markers. Native Americans were often left unburied entirely. Rivers carried bones, hillsides hid skulls. The land itself became a cemetery. 30. Romantic ruins versus dark truth. Tourists visit ghost towns today. They see old wooden buildings, rusty signs, vintage charm. They don't see mass graves, racial violence, starving children. Ghost towns are marketed as nostalgia. In reality, they are crime scenes. 31. Gold changed the meaning of land. Before the gold rush, land was sacred. After gold, land became a commodity. Ownership was decided by force. Whoever had the gun kept the ground. This mentality spread across the American West. Gold rush ideology didn't end in California, it expanded. 32. A silence that still screams. The erased tribes never returned, the ghost towns never recovered, the rivers never healed, and the wealth never reached those who suffered most. History moved on, but the silence remains loud. 33. The end of the lone miner myth. The gold rush began with individuals, men with shovels, pans, and dreams. But those men didn't win. They never could. As surface gold disappeared, mining required heavy machinery, capital investment, legal power, political influence. The era of the lone miner ended. The age of corporate extraction began. 34. From pickaxes to empires. Large companies moved in. They bought claims from desperate miners, entire valleys, water rights, political favors. Mining became industrial. Men were no longer dreamers, they were laborers, underpaid, disposable, replaceable. Gold rush capitalism had found its final form. 35. The railroad kings arrived. Gold needed transportation. Railroads provided it. Men like Leland Stanford, Collis P. Huntington, Mark Hopkins, Charles Crocker built empires on gold rush wealth. They didn't mine gold, they controlled movement. Whoever controlled the rails controlled the West, and they did it using bribery, land theft, exploited labor, especially Chinese workers, paid less, treated worse, and discarded when no longer useful. 36. Chinese labor used, then erased. Thousands of Chinese men built the railroads. They worked in freezing mountains, deadly tunnels, explosive zones. Many died in avalanches and blasts. Their bodies were buried anonymously or shipped home in boxes. When the railroads were finished, Chinese workers were blamed for economic problems and violently expelled. They built America's infrastructure. America repaid them with racism. 37. Banks, the real gold winners. Most gold didn't stay with miners. It went to banks. Banks controlled loans, bought claims cheaply, financed companies, took gold as collateral. When miners failed, banks took everything. The gold rush created California's financial elite. The poor stayed poor. The rich got richer. 38. The environmental cost goes corporate. Corporations scaled destruction. Hydraulic mining didn't stop. It expanded. Mountains were leveled. Rivers became toxic sludge. Farmland was buried. When farmers sued, companies delayed, bribed, and ignored. Profit always came first. Nature had no voice. 39. Laws written for the powerful. Mining laws favored corporations. Claim rules were vague. Enforcement was weak. Violence filled the gaps. Those with money hired lawyers. Those without lost everything. This legal imbalance became the blueprint for future American industries. 40. The American dream gets a price tag. The gold rush promised opportunity, equality, freedom. What it delivered was wage labor, corporate control, class division. The dream was sold to millions. The profit stayed with a few. This wasn't failure, it was design. 41. Ghost towns multiply. When corporations finished extracting value, they left. No rebuilding, no responsibility, no compensation. Entire regions collapsed economically. Ghost towns spread across California, Nevada, Colorado. America learned a new lesson. When profit leaves, communities die. 42. Violence goes corporate too. Strikes were crushed. Unions were broken. Private guards replaced law enforcement. Mining towns became company towns. Workers had no rights, no voice, no escape. This wasn't the Wild West anymore. It was industrial oppression. 43. The gold rush sets the pattern. What happened during the gold rush became the American model. Extract resources, exploit labor, destroy land, move on. It happened again with oil, coal, timber, railroads. The gold rush wasn't an event, it was a template. 44. Who really got rich? Not the miners, not the immigrants, not the native people. The winners were bankers, railroad tycoons, corporate investors. Their names still exist today. Universities, streets, buildings. Built on gold, built on blood. End of Part 4. 45. The gold rush didn't end, it evolved. History books say the gold rush ended in the 1850s. That is a lie. The methods changed. The mindset did not. America learned during the gold rush that land exists to be exploited. People can be replaced. Nature can be sacrificed. Profit justifies violence. That belief system never disappeared. It modernized. 46. Racism institutionalized. The racial hierarchy born in the gold rush hardened into law. Anti-Chinese sentiment led directly to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, segregation, immigration bans. Native Americans were pushed into reservations, boarding schools, cultural erasure. Mexican landowners lost property through fraud and violence. The gold rush taught America who mattered and who didn't. 47. Environmental destruction as policy. The environmental devastation of the gold rush was never repaired. Mercury remains in California rivers today. Soil contamination still affects farming. Flooding caused by mining debris reshaped landscapes permanently. America learned another lesson. Destroy now, apologize later, or don't apologize at all. This pattern repeated with oil drilling, coal mining, industrial farming. The gold rush normalized environmental sacrifice. 48. Ghost towns as national amnesia. Thousands of ghost towns remain across the West. They are treated as tourist attractions, movie sets, nostalgic ruins. But ghost towns are warnings. They exist because profit left. People were abandoned. Communities collapsed. They remind us that when money disappears, morality often goes with it. 50. The American dream rewritten in blood. The gold rush reshaped the American dream. It changed from build a future together to get rich before someone else does. Competition replaced community. Greed replaced responsibility. This mentality echoes in modern corporate culture, economic inequality, resource exploitation. The dream survived. The ethics did not. 51. The forgotten dead. There are no monuments for native tribes wiped out, Chinese laborers buried nameless, women exploited and discarded, children who died unseen. Their bones remain in riverbeds, hillsides, unmarked graves. History moved forward. They did not. 52. Why this story was sanitized. America needed heroes. The truth was inconvenient. So the gold rush was rewritten as adventure, innovation, progress. Violence was minimized. Genocide was erased. Racism was justified. Myths were easier than accountability. 53. What the gold rush teaches us today. The gold rush is not ancient history. It explains corporate greed, environmental collapse, racial inequality, economic exploitation. It shows what happens when profit outranks humanity. Speed replaces ethics. Power goes unchecked. The past is not dead. It's active. 54. American Gold Rush America versus modern America. Look closely. The patterns remain. Resource extraction without responsibility. Wealth concentrated at the top. Communities sacrificed for profit. Different century, same system. The gold rush was just the prototype. 55. The final irony.
Gold was supposed to bring prosperity. Instead, it brought death, destruction, division. Most miners died poor. Most towns vanished. Most promises were broken. Gold enriched a nation. It impoverished its soul. 56. Remembering what was erased. History is not just what is written. It is what is deliberately forgotten. To remember the dark side of the gold rush is to honor the dead, expose the lies, learn from the damage. Silence protects the powerful. Truth protects the future. 57. Final words. The American gold rush is often told as a triumph. In reality, it was a warning. A warning about greed without limits, progress without morality, wealth built on suffering. The gold is gone. The consequences remain.